Valheim has a game-changing update, one of the biggest content patches that we've seen so far since its release, and boy does it look like this is the start of a great future for the Viking open world survival game. This is Hearth and Home. In February of 2021, Valheim released out of nowhere a new multiplayer PvE co-op survival set in mythical Norse times. Players took to the world to build bases, explore lands and dungeons, or set into the oceans to discover new places to settle. The main storyline took you along an array of terrible bosses for you and your friends to face. From sea monsters to tree giants, the game really was a sensational hit. Reaching the top 10 concurrently played games on Steam within the first week, it was almost a dream come true for the developers. Gate, a 5-man team at that point, managing to create a AAA-sized game with the budget of an indie. Despite, however, its massive initial success, like any game, the player base did start to calm down as time moved on. Surfing around 15 to 20,000 concurrent players, it's still a very healthy size for any game to this day, let alone what really was an indie title at heart. But Hearth and Home came in a few days ago as the first update on the long roadmap that Valheim released back early this year, taking us for a look into the future for content coming into the game. And with this massive new update came a resurgence in player base, with 50 to 70,000 gamers coming back to enjoy this Viking world. So what does it actually add? What can you expect from loading up a world with the new Hearth and Home update, and what effects will it have on your gameplay? First of all, Iron Gate, the developers, recommend starting a new world once you've downloaded this. A new game is really in order to help appreciate all the differences that have been added. Now, don't worry, this is not paramount, as I'm sure some of you are crying in the back there because you spent months and months on your world building your bases and exploring all the dungeons you can, and you really don't want to restart. Now, you don't have to restart a new world, but it just means that you're going to have to go further out, discover new lands and explore new places, loading up new chunks as you will, in order to get the most out of all the new items and resources that the update adds. One of the main things that Hearth and Home is really focusing on is bringing quality of life additions to the game. A completely new food system has been added. Before, food gave you the same stamina as health, or at least a pretty even split, but now it has 3 categories to the food that you eat and consume. If there's a red icon on the food, this replenishes your health most of the time. If there's a yellow icon, it really focuses on replenishing your stamina. And if there's a white icon, it will do a little bit of both for you. This is a great thing to add a little bit more tactics to what food you hunt, or what ingredients you want to use, what recipes you want to work on, and what things you actually want to do within your game, so you can then consume the energy and food that you need in order to accomplish those things. Additionally, with this and talking about food, there is no food bar anymore. You don't have to spend ages trying to fill it up and get to a certain point in order to replenish all your stamina. It just goes into your health and stamina bars when you consume that food itself. And you can see on the left there is now new food timers. When you consume a meal or a bit of meat, you can see a timer pops up telling you how long that food will last for and how long it will give you the buffs that you have so selected with consuming that item. But speaking of health and stamina, you can now eat the food that suits your playstyle. If you want to go out hunting all the time, you're going to want a lot of stamina and maybe a little bit of health in case you get attacked by a wild boar. This means that you're going to have to try and find the right food in order to do this. Maybe you're going to be really into base building and you're the person that stays at homes to make it, well, homely, which is definitely something you can do with this new Hearth and Home update. So stamina is really going to be your focus. Health is not necessarily at the forefront of your ideals, so make sure you're eating the food that warrants those bigger stamina boosts. But within this adds a few more buffs and a few more advantages to having things like better health. Before, of course, it just meant you could take a bit more damage, but now buffing and increasing your health gives you the ability to block for longer with shields. The tower shield being the main shield that you're going to be using for defensive purposes. Using it to block oncoming attacks maybe as 1, 2, 3, even 4 enemies, while your friends or your co-op partners go around the side, hitting them with bows or even hand-to-hand weapons. The buckler is a much faster shield used for stunning and attacking enemies, and this is going to be used way more offensively than what you can expect from the tower shield. But the higher health you can, especially when you're using this tower shield for defense, it will have much bigger effects on the enemies once they get stunned by you. They'll be stunned for longer and more often, and of course you can take way more hits the better health you have. The update in general, however, adds way more ingredients, completely new crops such as onions, as we can see here, and distinctive meat. Now it's not just general meat when you kill an animal, you have distinctive things like wolf meat, boar meat, deer meat, and so on and so forth, each having their own different buffs and effects, as I mentioned earlier on in the video. But what if maybe you've been building a lot of home? Maybe you want to really increase your stamina stamina, so you've consumed the right amount of food in order to do that. But then all of a sudden your teammates log on and they say, hey, it's time to go and destroy the next boss. But you're like, hey, I can't. I've just eaten a load of stamina food. I can't eat anything else. Well, now there's a cool new mechanic where you can make your character throw up, completely chunder all the food across the floor, and it means that you can then consume some more food depending on what you're going to do if you want to change your playstyle within a short amount of time. So you can then consume the food in order to boost your health. It's a cool little mechanic that I don't think many people will use all that often, but it's nice to have there and adds a bit more of a dynamic tactical addition in order to your gameplay. And speaking of tactical additions, there are so many new weapons and of course advances to the weapons. Lots of balancing and adjustments as you'd expect. Things like the two-handed axe are much faster and the bow has been balanced a little bit as well. A few extra things that have been added is now multiplayer map sharing, so you can share the data with other players in your world, so you're able to move between people, hosting and so on and so forth. Plus there are some brilliant and gorgeous new looking buildings. The Hearth and Home update is really focusing on, well, the hearth and home. Of course, we've talked about food and stamina and those updates that have come in, but the new furniture is really what we're looking at here. Being able to build new shingle roofs on your buildings, being able to have different variations in furniture such as thrones and of course nice fire pits that will be able to change the aesthetics. And now admittedly this is a smaller part of the video since they don't really have real mechanical effects on your game. It is way more aesthetic, but I think a lot of people that play a game like Valheim that are really focused on those base building aspects will like this sort of thing within the update. Overall, I think it's a really solid addition to the game. They have completely changed the way that you will be living and breathing within this world, the way you consume food and the way that you use it to your advantages and to change your playstyle. It adds way more dynamic strategy to the game, and whilst I think some people really have been expecting a bit more content from the game in order to boost that player base a little bit more, perhaps new monsters, new enemies in order to fight, I think we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that. Talking about waiting a little bit longer, what can we expect from the future? Well, as I mentioned, there was a roadmap that was released a month or so after the initial outing of Valheim, so we can get a decent idea of what's coming next. The next update is going to be Cult of the Wolf. We also have the Seaworthy Saga, which will be focusing on naval gameplay, adding in way more to explore in the ocean and of course way more ships that you can craft and build and go out on your voyages. And then later on we get a completely new biome, the Voyage to the Mistlands, which sounds absolutely dark and dingy, but we don't have all that much information about that just yet. But the future looks pretty bright for Valheim. It's had a really solid player base, and for being an indie game upon release, the reception has been overwhelming. And hopefully with, well, presumably the mad amount of stacks that the developers have earned, we will get a lot of new content coming very, very soon. But let me know what you think. Have you downloaded the new Hearth and Home update yet? And what do you think of it? Do you think it is worthy of a full game-changing update, or do you think they should probably have added a little bit more in with it? Leave your comments down below. But leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, leave a dislike if you didn't. And until then, I will see you in the next one.